Togo is on fire. For days now, protesters, many of them young, unemployed, just fed up, have flooded the streets of Lomé, risking everything to demand change. To demand a government that respects their voice, a leader who doesn't rule like a king, and a future that isn't locked behind barbed wire and police shields. And how does the government respond? With violence, with repression, with fear.
Togo is burning, not just from the fires lit in protest on the streets of Lomé, but from decades of suppressed voices, silenced youth, and the slow erosion of a democracy that never truly was. And while government officials insist it's just a few agitators spreading false information, the scenes unfolding on the ground tell a different story. Togo, a small West African country with a long and complex past, is now at the center of a storm that has been brewing for generations. For the past several days, thousands of Togolese citizens, many of them young, unemployed, and desperate for a different future, have taken to the streets. They've blocked roads, defied curfews, and raised their voices in defiance of what they see as the latest betrayal by their government. The demands are simple: freedom, accountability, and the right to choose their leaders. And the government's response? Brutal. According to multiple human rights organizations, security forces have carried out door-to-door arrests without warrants. Protesters have been beaten with batons and ropes, private homes have been looted, and in some areas, properties have been set ablaze. The Associated Press confirmed at least 7 deaths since the unrest began, among them 2 teenagers whose lifeless bodies were later found floating in the waters east of Lomé. This isn't about the cost of bread or rising fuel prices. It's about 60 years of one family tightening its grip over an entire nation. This is about a generation standing up and declaring, Togo is not your inheritance.
Ladies and gentlemen, he really wants to stay on as president for life. And that explains why he changed the constitution last year. He and his family actually want to claim the country as a birthright. The Gnassingbé family wants to rule for as long as Togo will exist, ladies and gentlemen. So their plan is to control every facet of the country that can threaten their rule, to keep them in power until they relinquish that control to their son. That's exactly what the father did for the current president, ladies and gentlemen. Over the weekend, several Togolese had to run to the neighboring countries and to the villages for safety. And it is all because the government wants to kill this revolutionary fire. This fire, lit by Captain Traoré, cannot be quenched, ladies and gentlemen. This revolution is a must for Togo and all.
In May 2025, Togo's parliament approved a constitutional reform eliminating direct presidential elections. The president will now be chosen by a council of ministers, an unelected body dominated by the ruling party. This was not a general election, it was a power consolidation. Source: Togo National Assembly, Human Rights Watch. Back to the streets of Togo, the spark that reignited the uprising came from an unlikely source, a popular singer known as Amron. Last month, he released a video urging citizens to mobilize against the government. He was arrested the next day. When he was released 2 weeks later, he publicly apologized to President Faure Gnassingbé and claimed he needed psychiatric treatment. Many believe that apology was coerced, but regardless, it didn't deter the demonstrators. At the heart of the protests is a recent constitutional change that has effectively abolished presidential term limits and direct elections. Instead of the people electing their leader, that responsibility now lies with the Council of Ministers, an arm of the ruling elite. And unsurprisingly, President Faure Gnassingbé has positioned himself as the unelected president of the council with no term limits. This is not just political strategy, it's dynastic rule, plain and simple. The Gnassingbé family has ruled Togo since 1967. Faure's father, Gnassingbé Eyadema, seized power in a military coup and held it for 38 years. When he died in 2005, the military bypassed constitutional norms to install his son. Since then, Faure has extended his presidency through constitutional amendments, electoral manipulation, and now a complete overhaul of the system that once offered a glimpse of democracy. Let's rewind. Togo gained independence from France in 1960. Its first president, Sylvanus Olympio, had a bold vision, economic self-reliance, and true sovereignty. But that dream was short-lived. He was assassinated in 1963 during Africa's first post-independence coup. One of the coup's orchestrators? Gnassingbé Eyadema. He returned to seize full control in 1967, transforming Togo into a one-party state with no free press and widespread repression. Under his rule, opposition voices were jailed, exiled, or disappeared. When he died, Faure Gnassingbé took the baton, promising reform but delivering more of the same. In 2019, Faure changed the constitution to reset his presidential term limits. In 2020, he won a fourth term. In 2025, he scrapped elections altogether. And now, protesters are being killed for demanding a basic right, a say in who governs them. Civil society groups have condemned the state's violent crackdown. At least 3 bodies, including 2 minors, were discovered in a lagoon. 2 more were found in the capital's lake and another 2 in separate districts of Lomé. Though the government claims these were accidental drownings, eyewitnesses and activists paint a grimmer picture, one of targeted killings. And what about the regional bodies meant to uphold democracy and protect civilians? ECOWAS and the African Union have remained eerily silent. These institutions, established to promote peace and constitutional order, have done little, if anything, to hold Faure Gnassingbé accountable. Let's not forget, ECOWAS appointed Faure as its chairman from 2017 to 2018. The African Union even welcomed him as a mediator in the Rwanda-DRC conflict. Yes, the same man who refuses to leave power in his own country was tasked with resolving disputes in others. If that isn't hypocrisy, what is? Now, some argue that Togo's economy is growing. On paper, that's true. GDP is rising steadily, hovering around 5.5% annually. Inflation is low. The ports are active. International investors are taking notice. But ask a young Togolese graduate what that means for them. Youth unemployment is near 34%. Nearly 20% of the population still lives on less than $1.90 per day. Corruption, red tape, and nepotism choke opportunity. And in rural communities, food insecurity remains a harsh reality. So yes, the numbers look good for the elite. But for the average citizen, the promised prosperity never arrives. While GDP growth has been steady, income inequality remains high. Youth unemployment is one of the highest in West Africa. Poverty persists, and public services are weak. Source: World Bank, IMF, Togo National Development Plan. So what's really at stake here? It's more than a constitution. It's about dignity, justice, and a right to dream. And yet peaceful protests have been banned in Togo since 2022. Media outlets like RFI and France 24, which reported on the situation, have been suspended. Independent journalists are being silenced. Protesters are being hunted. But even in the face of danger, the people of Togo are rising, because they know this isn't just about one man or one election. It's about rejecting a regime that has robbed them of their future. They're rewriting their story, not with political speeches, but with their presence in the streets, their courage in the face of armed forces, and their refusal to back down. Togo is not the exception. It is the reflection of a larger continental crisis. Across West Africa and beyond, constitutional manipulations, authoritarianism, and political dynasties are becoming the norm. Guinea, Côte d'Ivoire, Uganda, Congo, Cameroon, all examples of leaders reshaping the rules to stay in power indefinitely. And while the African Union and ECOWAS remain largely symbolic, the people are forming their own coalitions. A new generation is waking up, one that refuses to accept silence as survival. So what must be done? First, the Togolese people must be heard. Real dialogue must begin, not with elites, but with those who have lost the most, the youth, women, and civil society organizers who have risked everything. Second, ECOWAS and the African Union must evolve. If they cannot enforce their own rules, they should step aside for new institutions, ones that place people above presidents. Finally, Africa needs a united youth front, a Pan-African coalition that speaks across borders and demands change not with violence, but with vision, a force not controlled by politicians, but led by the people. Because if Togo's warning goes unheeded, the fire will spread. What is happening in Lomé today could be the fate of Nairobi, Accra, or Abidjan tomorrow. So we ask, how many more must die before Africa listens to its people? Thank you for tuning in to Voice of Africa. If you found this report insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our community of truth seekers. Drop a super thanks if you can to support independent journalism. And in the comments below, let us know. Is it time to build new institutions that truly serve the African people? Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and stay free. Voice of Africa.